You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannon Merlot and Julie Parker. Join their conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to greater success.
Hello, Julie. Welcome to Practicing the Art of Small Business, and welcome, listeners. Julie, how are you?
I am really, really well. And also welcome to the viewers, those of you who have the absolute gift of seeing us with your eyeballs. Lucky you.
And if you're wondering how you can have the gift of viewing us with your eyeballs, we are on YouTube. So check out Practicing the Art of Small Business on YouTube. And look, while we're doing a little bit of cross-pollination promotion, Julie, should we also just say you're listening to this because no doubt you've loved the previous episodes and going to assume that there is a lot of love here. Why waste your time otherwise? And so just give us a little 5-star review just to show us and everyone else some love. If it's not 5 stars, we don't want to hear about it. No, we do. We love feedback, but maybe do it offline and that way we can improve and then we can get a 5-star review. No, we don't want to influence your reviews. Anyway, give us a 5-star review.
That would be super. I would love that.
And how have you been, Julie?
I've been really good. Very good. We last recorded about 3 weeks ago. So what have your 3 weeks been taken up with? What's been a focus of your group, of your weeks?
My goodness, it's been an up and down 3 weeks. So gosh, I wouldn't even know where to start. It feels like a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, but I did take some time off over the Easter break, which was great. I don't often take time off, so I really gave myself permission to recharge and renew, which I needed. And since then, I have been head down in a bit of a consulting gig, which is really cool. And actually, we didn't plan this, but the consulting gig, probably the reason why it's come up, the consulting gig is all about culture, which is why, Julie, what is episode 18 today about?
Team culture. How relevant.
How relevant.
And team culture is certainly one of my favourite topics as well.
Great. I realised that I didn't ask you what you've been working on the past 3 weeks, Julie. So tell me about that and then we'll dig into episode 18.
Thanks so much for asking, Shannon.
My pleasure.
It's all been awesome, ridiculously awesome and wonderful. And I've, now that I've become quite the gardener since living here in Huntingdale, Victoria, the water, the rain, the beautiful rain from the heavens coming down and nourishing my plants and my vegetables has thrilled me to the core. But otherwise, everything's been great. I love Easter breaks because it's a number of days where people don't naturally contact you and you can get so much work done if you're just in front of your computer the whole time. So it's been fantastic.
So if you missed the subtle subcontext of what Julie just said, can no one please contact her for days at a time? No, that is not true. That is not true.
I was listening to, you brought up something that I think I'm going to start to incorporate into my world in some way because I think it's a very useful thing. Susie Daphnis is a fantastic entrepreneur and she has her business, I think it's called, a group where she helps women entrepreneurs. And whenever she recognised that after a big launch, she's always got a lot of stuff to do. So what she now does is blocks out a whole week after a launch so she can freely get as much work done around it that's required. And that's probably a good idea that we can focus on in future time management tools that, what about actually scheduling in days where you can plan just to be in front of the computer, getting all the stuff done so it doesn't stay on the to-do list and overwhelm you in the coming days. But that's another topic. Let's talk about team culture.
Yeah, let's do culture. And we're not talking about the thing that over COVID you might have tried sourdough, making bacteria. We're not talking about that culture. We're talking about the bedrock of your organisation. I mean, obviously, if you're a bakery, then that is probably the bedrock of your organisation. But we're talking more about people.
I love team culture and I love sourdough bread. So let's get stuck straight into it. So what's been your focus around team culture? How would you describe team culture?
Thank you for asking that. It's actually, I think, and I haven't researched this for our chat today, but I think that team culture is it's kind of the heartbeat of the organisation. There's a whole bunch of things that underpin what culture is, from really what is acceptable to wear to work, through to do we all go out for coffee? And I'm thinking about, when I'm saying this, I'm thinking about the last employed environment I was in, which was the Movember Foundation. And they were fantastic. Casual wear, it was casual wear. And when I started my business, I was still working with them. And when I went to networking, I would dress up in business attire, suit and skirt and heels. And people would look at me like, what the is going on with you? And so culture is really like, do you fit into our tribe? The whole of the organization would go down to the coffee shop to get coffee. So and that was part of what drove the culture of cohesiveness, because that was what was really important. It was one of the values of Team Movember, was that we're a team. The values, obviously. I'll pause there for a moment because I'm sure you can add a lot more value on what makes up a culture.
I think it is certainly agreements that a group of people make on how they're going to behave with one another, and behave with one another in their general daily interactions during the operations of the business day, but also how we're going to behave with one another when things don't go according to plan, whether there's a conflict between a couple of people or there's been disappointing results for the business, or even how we choose to celebrate our wins as a group as well. And to really intimate to people and that I work with what team culture actually means. Just look, as a young child, you're growing up and you went to friends' homes, and each friend's home you would behave slightly differently because what was the accepted behaviour was slightly different from house to house. Some houses, they wouldn't mind you saying, a little blue language, bloody shit. Others, it would be absolutely nothing like that, and you'd be quite prim and proper in those other houses. And the same is true for business teams, that every business team has its unique way of being, of behaving, and there are things that are acceptable, things that are not acceptable, and you very quickly find out what those are when you come into the team. And one of the issues that many businesses do have, of course, is that they've got their stated team culture the way they would love to be, but in reality, things are a little bit different, and every new staff member that comes into that group will not conform to what they've read about in the team culture statement. They'll conform to what actual reality is, no matter how bad it possibly could be.
So I think what you're talking about there, Julie, is there's the ground rules that are stated. This is how we are going to all behave, but it's really the unwritten ground rules that drives behaviour. And unwritten ground rules were coined by an Aussie, Steve Simpson. And these are the things that underpin how we actually interact with each other. An interesting example of unwritten ground rules, if I may share, Julie.
Please do share. I love what you do.
Thank you. And I am reusing and repurposing information that I've already seeked. I found this information when I was researching for my own YouTube channel, and I have something about values and culture on my YouTube channel.
And what is the address of that YouTube channel, Shannon? What's the name of it?
If you happen to just look for Inspired Outcomes Consulting, you shall find. Seek and you shall find. And I shall be there. And I shall talk to you in dulcet tones about all things business and fun.
Fantastic. Thanks, so.
I just feel that it's important that if you do stalk me on multiple locations, I'm feeding you similar information. So
that's
sorry,
good.
Not sorry.
Repetition is the key to remembering things. We can't say things once and expect everyone to remember these things. That's why I won't mind getting dementia, because I'll just be repeating myself so everyone knows exactly how I think and feel about everything.
And I think actually interesting point with regard to culture, because actually you can't say and you can't build culture with one activity and with having one conversation about values. It's something that is embedded and repeated and again and again and again. It's becomes dogma, I suppose.
Yeah.
So anyway, the example of an unwritten ground rule that I wanted to share in 2010, BP had its Deepwater Horizon spill. I don't know if you recall that, Julie, or not. No, that's
No,
okay.
sorry.
It's not a test.
But if it was, you'd fail. But it's not a test.
So values do generally underpin your culture. But at the time, BP's stated value was safety. But actually what happened was that they found out after the spill, and they did their investigations, that endemic across the entire organisation, from the management to the employees to contractors, there was actually really, really poor safety practices. They ended up engaging in a series of shortcuts that really compromised safety, and that spill led to 11 lives lost and 50 million barrels of oil spilled. So we said that safety is really important to us, but all of our actions and all of our systems and processes and what we rewarded and what we said was important was obviously had nothing to do with safety, because what they found is that safety practices caused the spill. So this is where you may say something is a certain way, but unless you drive behavior and you drive the culture, something else is going to happen that will undermine, I suppose, the culture that you want to create. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you said, Shannon, that values underpin culture, I wrote that down because one of the things I'm going to be focusing on with one of my clients is how do we build values and make them meaningful into the workplace. And I love that phrase, that in order to recognize what your culture is going to be as a business, to actually understand what your values are. We keep coming back to this point, don't we, Shannon? The value of values and the influence and impact that your stated values have on so many operations within the business.
And I love that you say that, because I have clients come back to me quite often when we've done values work. Often I find that they don't get why they're doing it, but once they've done it, they're like, Shannon, it still underpins everything that we do. We live and breathe these values. We talk about them all the time. We even bring the values to mind when we want to have difficult conversations, because one of my clients, theirs is, I'm going to misquote their value. It's lost on my brain at the moment, but it's something along the lines of there's no hard feelings. So when we're not, and the context around it is, we're not precious. We're going to give, they're very big on feedback, and it's not personal. And so it underpins how they interact with each other, because there's always work being edited in that work environment. So as quality for quality, and also with their customers, when they're providing work to the customers, if the customers have feedback, they're like, it's all good. It's all good. No problem. We're not taking it personally. And so I think that a lot of organizations, because it's on a lot of the, you should have values, people go, yeah, I've got values, accountability, integrity, honesty, collaboration. Yep. And we're done. We've got our values. But it's really about, once you've got values that are meaningful and that connect with the culture that you want to drive in the organization, then you've got to drive it.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the examples that have just come up for me around that is, because we do have these automatic buzzwords that come to mind when we talk about values. One of the ones, I work with dental practices, as some regular listeners and viewers would know. And one of the regular values is that the patient always comes first. Yet within their systems, if there is a cancellation at 3:00, the habit is to bring the 4:00 patient up to 3:00, then everyone can go home early. Where that is not living out, that means that the behaviour of the team is not reminiscent or being driven by the value of the patient always comes first. And so is that the starting point? When you want to develop a team culture, Shannon, is the starting point actually as a team getting together, brainstorming, sharing ideas around what are our values?
I think that's a really great way of underpinning culture in the organisation. So especially if you're if this is the first time you've heard about values and you've got a team and you don't have them, absolutely, I would say get them together, make it a fun experience, make everyone's opinion valuable and welcome. One of the couple of caveats that I'd want to suggest or flag as opportunities for doing it with somewhat more finesse, because I'm all for getting it done, but you may get better outcomes when you've got that clear vision of what does your organization look like in the future. And when you're brainstorming your values, you want to ensure that those values are going to help you to achieve that future vision of the organization. Because that's the whole idea, right? We're working towards, this is what my organization is in the future. And my values are going to help me to get there having a good time. I think one of the other risks when you're doing it with your team members is that unless you're clear on your vision, they can come up with values that are contrary to how you want the organization to be. So there's a bit of balance between collaboration with your team and bringing them on the bus and allowing them to be part of it. But my opinion or my experience when I've done values before is there's always been a little bit of calibration with what does the business owner, and this is also for small business because this is a small business podcast, it's all been about what does the business owner hold true in terms of how they want the organization to be seen, because ultimately they're responsible for responsible for the success of achieving that. So we do want values that align with that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely does. And I think too, for companies out there, small businesses out there that don't have a series of stated values and certainly don't have a stated or have thought much about what kind of culture they want to develop within their team, it is one of those things, it's like our self-awareness. What's true for us when we were 20 is far different from what we are now. We need a starting point. Start with what's relevant, what seems important, what seems urgent to you now to address within your organisation. Maybe part of the first step to developing a great team culture is getting the team together and having each one tell of experiences, great and not so great, of previous workplaces. What worked really well in terms of having a happy, harmonious, productive, efficient team that came up with brilliant ideas on how to make the business more successful. And also, what happened in previous teams that made you feel deflated, made you feel like you didn't want to come into work that day, and start to recognize what's helpful and what's unhelpful. And slowly, over time, you'll then start to have a team culture that is becoming clarified for everybody. And it's at that point that you can actually start stating it down and then really living the talk, walking the talk. That is the most important aspect of it. So walk the talk and make sure that you are rewarding others when they're walking the talk as well, making sure that you're rewarding the behaviour that we want repeated.
I want to add to that, but also potentially contradict it, just as a different idea or concept. So when getting people together and having that conversation is actually a really great opportunity for you as a leader to learn what works and doesn't work in organizations. And it's a great way of understanding what are the hot buttons for your team members. So from a leadership and management perspective, you get great insights into things that affected morale for individuals. And the reason why I talk about this more from a leadership management perspective and individuals is because something that's very tetchy for one person may not actually have the same effect on another person. So, for example, I didn't like how quite often the organisation, we'd get interrupted to have lunches together and coffees together, and there'd always be music playing, and it was really distracting and I couldn't get my work done, and I really wanted an office where I could lock myself away. Well, that sounds like a kind of fun culture to lots of people and lots of organizations, especially if you're a, I don't know, collaborative workspace where we're having coffees and lunches and music and that sort of thing. I'm thinking like maybe a marketing design studio, you know, back in the old days. Then that's actually going to create you're not going to change your culture on the basis of that. You're actually probably wanting to realign that person to what the culture is for the organization that you want to be fostering and driving. So I think that can be really helpful to understand how people see the world. But I think that you can also see that as a contrast to the culture that you might want to be driving, because just because someone says that this is what they didn't like doesn't necessarily mean, if that doesn't align with the culture that you really want to drive in your organization, that's ultimately your decision.
Absolutely. And you've also spoken in the past around the clarity that's required for certain elements of running a business when we're working with people, and team culture certainly is that case as well. For example, if a team culture of a particular business was we're going to be respectful to one another, what does respectful mean to each member of that team? And that clarity of communication and frankness of communication can be very helpful in getting people on the same page. So for each individual, it means a different thing, you know, the social element, the productive element, the meetings element, the respect element. It can mean something different to each person. But as a team working in this environment, in this business, with this particular market as our clients and that we're trying to serve, this is what respect means to us. And making decisions around that and agreement around that.
What you've suggested there, or what you've said there, is actually the next step that I certainly encourage organisations to do when talking about their values. So once you've got your values, and I personally love values that are not single word values. It's a bit of a passion of mine. I've got a sheet. I'm happy to share it with any of the listeners if you want, which is a series of lots of different organizations' cultures. And it can be quite enlightening because you can sort of see that you can be really creative with your values. And so, for example, one of my business highest values is let's talk it out. And you could say, oh, that's just communication. But if you asked me about my value, you've got the value of communication, I'd be like,
yeah, it seems pretty empty, doesn't it? Yeah.
Correct. Whereas let's talk it out. I mean, I get goosebumps when I say that, because it's like, oh, I've got a problem. Let's talk it out. You've got a problem. Let's talk it out.
And as an observer of those comments, what I envision in my brain is completely different.
Correct. So once you've got values and I think that whether you have single word values or more creative, I say passion-driven values, because I think that when you can use something that's a bit more creative, it's more exciting. It's something that people can hold on to a little bit more. That will actually drive your culture, to be fair. But once you've got your values, the next step down, and this goes to your point around the respect and defining it, are the behaviours that we do. Is that correct English? The behaviours that we do? The behaviours that we undertake? The behaviours?
Our behaviours.
Please feel free, listeners, to school me on my English. Once you've got your values, it's then really important to define the behaviours that show that we are living those values. So with regard to respect, one behaviour might be don't swear at anyone.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Damn you.
Oh my goodness, you're not living the value. Let's talk it out, Julie, because that's one of my values.
Yeah, that's right. And another agreed behaviour that would then be aligned with let's talk it out, or great communication, or even respect, is we're not going to interrupt each other. We're going to give each other the chance. I love it. And this can be an evolving journey, as I was mentioning before, because as we move as a team throughout the days, weeks, months, years, with new team members coming in and old ones going out, we can identify when things aren't going smoothly and when things are going smoothly. And it's about taking that additional step. Gee, things have been going really well. What's happening around us at the moment that are making things going really well? Well, I think one of the things we've improved the number of times we've gotten together to talk things out or to improve the community. We're meeting together every day at the very start of the day just to have a quick 10-minute chat about what the day is going to hold. And we're supporting each other better throughout the day because of that. And when things become disruptive, what has gone on to have things become disruptive? Let's identify what unhelpful behaviours contributed towards that. And that, again, will help refine our elegant team culture that moving forward, we understand the behaviours to avoid.
I love what you've said there, Julie. And I think that one of the challenges that certainly clients that I work with have is, where do you find the time to do that sort of thing? What I would encourage business owners to do is to see the value in having those conversations on, for want of a better language again, on the regular, and having it such as a Monday meeting or a Friday meeting. And I'm definitely not someone for meetings for meetings' sake, but it's really about reflection. What's gone well this week? What are some of the behaviours that we saw that was living the values, giving recognition to people who have been living those values? What are the things that didn't go well this week? What can we improve? And I suppose that then underpins a culture of continuous improvement. But this, to be fair, we've talked about projection before. This is me projecting out that a organisation driven by improving quality and consistent improvement is really important. It might actually not be important to the culture of your organisation. So this is a moot point, and so don't do it.
Some of the things that we talk about are useless to you. Some of them might be helpful. You choose. You select which ones you implement. I am a huge fan of a group getting together, especially with dental practices, a little morning huddle, assessing who the patients are coming in. Do we need to make sure we've got scripts or referral pads or OPG x-rays, all these sort of things, and making sure that those two questions are asked every day. That what went well yesterday and what could have been improved upon yesterday. It's a lovely, snappy, short way of addressing issues that we don't make them bigger than they need to be, but we also don't forget them either. And it's at these little morning huddles that in dental surgeries, I suggest it's only 15 minutes. So whatever works for your business, but it's not designed to be a lengthy meeting, as you say, Shannon. Meetings for meeting's sake is more destructive to team morale, I think, than helpful. But it's at these little huddles that we can say, what are we going to focus on in terms of establishing our firm team culture this week or this month? When we're talking about behaving slightly differently to what we normally do, we require that reminder. Remember, we're focusing on adjusting our behaviour to be aligned with the team culture in this element this week, this month, depending on what element it will be. So if it was, let's talk it out, that might be something that you have in place in your morning huddle, set as a reminder in your morning huddle for a whole month, because you're not going to have daily opportunity to let's talk it out. You may have it every week instead. And so recognizing that it is not enough to simply state this is the new way of behaving and expect everyone to jump on board with that. It's creating the environment that's going to encourage them to shift their behavior over the long term, and so recognise the need for reminders around that. And the morning huddles can be a fantastic way of doing that.
I do love a morning huddle. And for anyone who was on the YouTube, you might have seen my face. I wanted to interrupt, but I didn't. That value, let's talk it out. You should, in my organisation, be living that every day, because the values that underpin that, or the behaviours that underpin my value of let's talk it out, are embrace the awkward conversation. So that is about the let's talk it out. But I suppose with that, it's about, for me in terms of service delivery, it's about picking the bear, having the awkward conversation. It's about when things aren't working, about stepping up and saying, this isn't working, I'm not happy. Or even between you and I, Julie, it's sort of like, not that Julie and I have awkward conversations, but there's been things where I felt like I've not been contributing as well. And it's really important for me to talk that out. Take 100% responsibility and own our mistakes. Big one, huge for this, for my organization. I actually have no problem with mistakes being made whatsoever. I'm very forward focused. It's very much about, okay, that happened. How do we fix it? How do we stop it from happening again? And so fostering the let's talk it out is really, for me, about going, okay, well, what was the challenge, or what was the mistake? How do we fix it? Do what we say. So that's really about, if we said we were going to do that thing or get back to someone, own it if we didn't, but try our best to do what we say we were going to do. And my other one is communicate with openness, honesty, and authenticity. So the authenticity drives me very much. I've been having marketing conversations recently where it's like, unless this is very aligned with how someone's going to see me live, I can't back it. So yeah. So
love it.
Every day for a month. I mean, you could do that for an entire year. You'd get bored, but
because I know that we're going to wrap up soon, Shannon, I just wanted to share with you what an element of team culture that I encourage my clients to implement. And people on the YouTube channel will see me holding up a glass ball-like vase, which are filled with those little silicone wristbands, and they're all in my signature colour. Mm-hmm. And on these wristbands, it has printed on the side the question, what can I do for you? Oh. And this is a lovely example of how you can start shifting your team culture in a positive way. So what can I do for you is a question that I think is enormously powerful. It can be your customer service policy in one nice, succinct sentence. What can I do for you? What can I do for you in terms of dental, for example, to help you be less anxious, more comfortable, more pain-free, more educated around what different treatments are available to you? What can I do for you is also a wonderful leadership policy as well. As a leader, to ask their team members, what can I do for you to help you be happier, more efficient, more productive, more heard, more listened to? And also for your team culture, that you've got every team member looking around at their fellow team members throughout the operation of the everyday, asking themselves, what can I do for that person to help them be more efficient, get their responsibilities done, and to be happier as well? And the reason why they're silicone wristbands is that at that morning huddle every morning, everyone takes one of the wristbands out of the jar, and it's a physical commitment that each team member is making to each other, that I will be approaching this day and each member of this team with a what can I do for you mindset. And that is a nice little reminder throughout the day as well, that am I managing my team members in a way that I am constantly asking myself, what can I do for them? And with some of the dental teams that I've encouraged to utilise this, they will then wear these wristbands home. One particular dentist said he wore his wristband home. His kids asked all about it. And then the following day he came home and his children were asking the mother, what can I do for you to help get dinner ready? So sometimes using a tool like a silicone wristband can really encourage and help your team have the regular reminders, making something more urgent, more important in their experience of it, so you can start to implement a different team culture within your organisation.
I like that as a reminder. Another tool, I know that we are wrapping up, but another tool or trick that I got a client to do when we were embedding new values and driving the culture change was part of the management team's KPIs was finding evidence of people living the values and using their Slack channel. They actually had a Slack channel called Living the Values, and they would shout out to someone. And I know this is kind of like cultivated fun, but we had to set expectations around, we want you to find people living the values, we want you to shout out to them, and then all the managers have to jump on this is amazing, fantastic, good job, do the little emojis, gifs and things like that, so that it made it acceptable for the rest of the team to then jump on the bandwagon and call out people living the values and encourage living the values. And then that then also drove the culture of the team cohesiveness, of people celebrating each other, doing the right thing. And with the podcast listeners, you can't see me using my finger talking marks, the right thing determined or based upon what the organisation wants to foster.
Yeah, nice. So to wrap up this episode, I want to also just quickly interject that why is the team culture important, and what are the ramifications of a great team culture? And one of them can be that when you are sourcing new talent to come into your organisation, quite often they're leaving one team culture because it's been negative, and they want to hear how magnificent yours is and how deflating it could be if they were really appealed by your team culture and they came in and reality was quite a bit different. So make sure you really do walk the talk with your team culture and see it as a lovely recruitment opportunity in the future as well. But also your team culture providing a consistency to branding or consistency to promise to your market as well. If you have got one of your marketing messages that we are the absolute best, the most professional, top of the line, and they come in and they see people acting not in accordance with that, then that's a consistency problem and a trust problem potentially as well for your clients. And so your team culture does have a strong and impactful ripple effect to the people that in the future will come and work at your organisation, not just the current ones, but also for your market.
Julie, I must add something else. You're using team culture. I use organisational culture. I think that there's an interesting definition potential here. When you're talking organisational culture, I say this is, for me, that is the whole of the organisation. And we think about it from marketing, from customer, from team, from process. It's the whole thing. Whereas team culture feels to me like it's a part of how we interact to live the culture. And there's no wrong or right on this. I just wanted to flag that culture underpins everything. It's not just your team. So even if it's just you on your own, defining what your organizational culture is defines how you turn up, how your marketing talks to your customer, how your customers feel in part of the journey. So not that I'm trying to school Julie, but my perception around culture is it's bigger than the team. It's the whole thing.
Wonderful clarification, Shannon. Thank you so very much. And thank you for today.
Thank you. Always such a pleasure. I've missed your face.
Oh, I missed your face too. And I'm sure all our viewers out there have missed ours as well. But don't forget to give us a review. Don't forget to be in communication with us, whether there's future topics that you would like to have us address, or whether there's comments around our existing topics. We would love to hear from you. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Bye.